The air felt heavy that evening, thicker than usual, as if the walls themselves knew something was wrong. The sound of drawers slamming broke the silence. Mother's voice trembled between anger and disbelief. Father's eyes cold and searching. They said money was missing. Again. And this time, their gaze stopped on her. Lena's heart pounded as she tried to speak, but every word came out as a plea, not proof. "I didn't take it," she whispered. But the room had already decided. Sometimes the people who raised you can wound you deeper than any stranger. What hurts more? Being accused of a lie, or realizing they believe it. The silence after their words cut sharper than the accusation itself. As the night fell, Father set up a camera, just to be sure, and somewhere in the quiet hum of that lens, truth waited, unseen. The next morning, the house felt colder. Every glance carried weight, every sound seemed to accuse her again. Breakfast was silent except for clinking spoons. Her brother, Mark, smirked slightly, pretending to comfort her, but something in his tone didn't sit right. "Don't take it personally," he said, sipping coffee. "They're just being careful." But careful shouldn't feel cruel. Lena stared at the camera light on the shelf, a red dot that watched but never spoke. She wondered, what if the truth hurts more than the lie? Days passed, but the tension didn't fade. It spread. Her parents stopped asking her anything beyond short, cold words. The warmth of good night had turned into silence. At school, Lena smiled like nothing was wrong. But every time her phone buzzed, she feared another accusation waiting at home. She used to think family was where truth lived. Now it felt like a place where doubt fed on love. That night, she couldn't sleep. The low red glow of the camera blinked in the dark. A silent reminder she was being watched in her own home. She stared back at it, wondering if it would see what her parents refused to. Her innocence. In that darkness, she made a quiet promise. "I'll prove it, even if it breaks me first." The next morning, she woke before everyone else. She stood by the window watching her parents leave for work, the weight of suspicion still heavy on her chest. The camera blinked behind her, waiting. She didn't know it yet, but that silent witness would change everything. Not just who they trusted, but who they really were. Days bled together like gray rain through dirty glass. No one shouted anymore. They didn't need to. Silence had taken over, heavier than any words. Every night, Lena heard whispers behind closed doors. Sometimes her name, sometimes just sighs of disappointment. At dinner, her seat felt colder. The sound of cutlery replaced conversation. She tried to remember when their eyes once looked at her with love. Maybe love turns into suspicion faster than anyone admits. She caught herself glancing at the camera sometimes, wondering if it saw her pain. If it even cared. Because in this house, truth didn't live in hearts anymore. It lived in pixels. At school, she smiled because she had to. Everyone saw her as quiet, polite, perfect. The kind of girl who couldn't possibly do wrong. But perfection doesn't protect you from being unloved. Between classes, she scrolled through her phone, rereading old messages from her mom, ones filled with love and pride. Before things broke, it felt like reading a ghost's handwriting. Sometimes she wanted to delete everything and start over, but you can't restart family. That evening, Mark came into her room without knocking. He tossed a few bills onto her desk and said, "Here, maybe this will shut them up." His tone was casual, too casual. She stared at the money like it was poison. "Why would you do that?" she asked. He shrugged. "Because you look guilty, even when you're not." Then he left, leaving her with more questions than comfort. Sometimes the cruelest thing isn't what someone says, it's what they don't explain. Later that night, she heard the floor creak outside her door. She froze, pretending to sleep. The faint sound of a drawer opening. The same one the money had disappeared from. Her pulse raced, every sound magnified in the dark. She wanted to get up, to see, to prove she wasn't crazy. but fear glued her still. Maybe the truth was walking right past her, and she let it. By morning, she couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The whispers, the looks, the footsteps, they built a storm inside her. When her parents left for work, she stood in front of the camera. "If you're really watching," she whispered, "then show them." Her voice cracked. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about being seen, being believed. And in that silent plea, the house seemed to listen. That night, Lena couldn't resist anymore. While everyone slept, she crept into the living room, heart pounding against her ribs. The camera blinked in the dark, silent, knowing. She connected it to her laptop, breath shaky, fingers trembling. Hours of nothing scrolled by, empty rooms, quiet dinners. Then she froze. A figure moved in the frame, slow, careful, deliberate. Her breath caught when she recognized the shape. Someone she loved, someone who shouldn't be there. The video ended before she could see what they did, but her world already cracked open. Sometimes truth doesn't set you free, it traps you in disbelief. She replayed the clip again, each time hoping she was wrong. But there it was, the same shadow, the same quiet movements. It wasn't her, it wasn't random. It was deliberate. The next morning, she couldn't look at her family the same way. Every word felt false. Every smile felt rehearsed. Truth had crept into her mind like poison, and she couldn't unsee it. All day, the thought haunted her. Who was the figure? Why were they there? That night, she adjusted the camera's angle, this time pointing it straight toward the drawer. If the house had secrets, she'd let it confess them. She sat awake for hours, listening to every creak, every breath of wind. She thought about her parents, about Mark, about how love could turn into something that looked like deceit. The next morning, she reviewed the footage again. Her hands trembled as the video loaded. The same figure returned, clearer this time. It wasn't a stranger, it was Mark. He moved quietly, looking over his shoulder, pulling something from the drawer. The screen flickered as he pocketed cash. Then, he smiled, not out of joy, but relief. The kind that comes from getting away with something too long. Lena's heart shattered. Betrayal doesn't scream, it whispers through moments like these. She stared at the screen long after the video ended, numb and shaking. Her brother, the one her parents trusted more than anyone, had been the one stealing from them. The same brother who told her to let it go. Now she understood why he wanted silence. But the real question burned inside her. Should she show her parents and destroy what was left of their trust? Or keep the truth and live with their lies? Sometimes, justice feels crueler than deceit. Lena didn't sleep. By morning, the decision was made. She wouldn't stay silent anymore, but she knew if she just told them, they wouldn't believe her. So she needed proof they couldn't ignore. She placed a few folded bills in the same drawer, right where the last ones had gone missing. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from quiet resolve. Love had blinded her once. It wouldn't again. The camera was reset, perfectly aimed, waiting. In this house, truth wasn't spoken. It was captured. Hours crawled by. Lena pretended to study in her room, every sound outside making her heart jump. When she heard footsteps, she held her breath. A soft creak, then silence. She waited longer, pulse racing, before stepping out. The drawer was slightly open. The bait was gone. The camera had seen it all. Truth now sealed in pixels. She smiled faintly, not with joy, but with the relief of finally having something real. That evening, she gathered her courage and asked her parents to sit down. "I want to show you something," she said quietly. Her mother's brows furrowed. Her father folded his arms. Mark leaned against the wall, pretending not to care. When Lena hit play, silence fell like a knife. The sound of a drawer sliding open, a shadow moving. Then, clear as daylight, Mark's face on the screen. her mother gasped. Her father's jaw tightened. Mark's smirk vanished. Mark, their father whispered, voice breaking. Tell me this isn't real. But Mark didn't answer. He just stared at the floor, his breath uneven. The silence stretched until it hurt. You blamed your sister, their mother said, her voice trembling with tears. You let us turn against her. Mark's eyes lifted, wet and tired. You already did, he said quietly. The room felt colder than before, not because of what he did, but because of what they'd allowed. When the video ended, no one spoke. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. Lena didn't cry. She'd already cried too much. Her parents turned to her, faces heavy with guilt. We're sorry, her mother whispered, but apologies felt small against the wound they'd made. Mark walked out without a word, the door shutting softly behind him. In that silence, something broke, but something else began to heal. Sometimes the truth doesn't fix everything. It just stops the bleeding. The next morning, the house felt hollow. The kind of quiet that comes after truth has already burned everything down. Mark hadn't come home all night. Mother kept pacing the living room, whispering prayers that felt more like apologies. Father just sat still, staring at his coffee until it went cold. Lena watched them both, torn between anger and pity. She finally had the proof. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. Because sometimes, when the truth finally comes out, you realize it didn't save anyone. By noon, the front door creaked open. Mark stood there, disheveled, eyes swollen from tears, shoulders sagging with defeat. No one spoke as he walked in. He looked at Lena, then at their parents. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he said. His voice cracked, soft and broken. I just needed help. But I knew you'd never see me as anything but perfect. His words hung in the air like smoke, thick and choking. He told them everything. About the debts, the lost job he'd hidden, the fear of disappointing them. Every word peeled back another layer of pride and pain. You always looked at Lena like she was fragile, he said quietly. But you looked at me like I had to be perfect. I couldn't breathe anymore. His voice broke into silence. Tears streamed down Mother's cheeks. Father closed his eyes, guilt etched deep. Lena just stared, unable to decide whether to hate him or hold him. I never wanted them to blame you, Mark said, looking up at Lena. But when they did, I didn't stop them. His words landed like a blade. For a moment, no one breathed. Lena swallowed hard, her voice trembling when she finally spoke. You didn't just steal money, she whispered. You stole me from them. The room fell into silence again, but this time, it wasn't anger holding them apart. It was heartbreak. And say interracial. It was heartbreak. When words ran out, only forgiveness remained. Not spoken, but sitting heavy between them. Father stood and placed a trembling hand on Mark's shoulder. We failed both of you, he said. Mother nodded through her tears. Lena exhaled slowly, eyes softening. She didn't say she forgave him. Not yet. But in her silence, there was something like mercy. Sometimes healing doesn't come as a hug. It comes as a quiet breath that says, I'm still here. The days that followed felt like walking through the ruins of something once sacred. No yelling, no blame, just silence. The kind that comes after a storm has already torn everything apart. Lena noticed her parents treating her gently now. Too gently, as if afraid she'd shatter at a word. But gentleness can't erase memory. Every time her mother's hand brushed her shoulder, she remembered being accused. Every glance from her father carried the weight of his regret. Forgiveness wasn't impossible, just unfinished. Mark tried to help more around the house, fixing things, cooking dinner, even cleaning the garage. But no one said thank you, not out of spite, but because gratitude didn't fit yet. He worked silently, like someone trying to rebuild a bridge that had burned to ashes. One night, Lena watched him from the doorway, sleeves rolled up, grease on his hands, eyes full of guilt. For the first time, she saw not the brother who betrayed her, but the boy who never learned how to ask for help. Their mother began talking more at dinner again. Small stories, nervous laughter, tiny pieces of normal. Father joined in, hesitant but trying. Lena listened, unsure whether to join or stay silent. Mark stayed quiet, but his eyes said what his mouth couldn't. I'm sorry. Sometimes healing doesn't arrive all at once. It drips in slowly, through gestures and pauses, through the courage to sit at the same table again. That weekend, Lena found Mark sitting on the porch staring at the empty street. "Do you hate me?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. She sat beside him, the breeze cool against their faces. "No," she said after a long pause. "I just don't trust you yet." He nodded slowly, accepting the honesty like a punishment he deserved. Some wounds don't bleed anymore, but they still ache when touched. Weeks passed. The house began to breathe again. Laughter returned in small pieces, faint, fragile, but real. Yet deep inside, Lena knew she could never go back to who she was before the accusation. Trust, once broken, never returns the same, but maybe it doesn't need to. Maybe what remains is something stronger. Honesty, stripped of illusion. As she watched her family talk that night, she realized healing wasn't forgetting what happened. It was choosing to love despite remembering. Spring arrived quietly. The air smelled of new beginnings, but the house still carried old memories. Lena packed her books into a worn suitcase, each fold of clothing a small goodbye. Her parents watched from the doorway, proud, scared, guilty. "Are you sure about this?" her mother asked. Lena nodded softly. "I need to find peace," she said. "Not anger, not revenge, just peace. Sometimes, leaving isn't about walking away. It's about finally breathing where the air doesn't remind you of pain." Mark stood outside her room, unsure if he should knock. When he finally did, he found her sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. "You don't have to go," he said quietly. She looked up, her eyes softer than he deserved. "I do," she replied. "But that doesn't mean I'm leaving you behind." He smiled faintly, pain flickering in his expression. "Forgiveness doesn't erase guilt. It just gives you somewhere to start again." The day she left, the house felt too still. Her parents hugged her tightly at the door. No long speeches, no promises, just the quiet understanding that love had survived the worst. Mark placed something in her hand, a tiny flash drive. "It's the footage," he said. "Delete it. We don't need to remember it like that anymore." She held it tightly, realizing he was right. Some truths are meant to be seen once, and then let go. Weeks later, Lena sat on a park bench miles away from home. The world quiet, except for birds and wind. She pulled out her phone, opened the video one last time, and watched her old self, frightened, misunderstood, broken. Then, she deleted it. Not because she forgot, but because she'd outgrown that version of pain. Sometimes, healing means choosing not to replay the moment that hurt you. Months later, the family gathered again. Smaller, quieter, but together. No cameras, no secrets, just laughter over dinner. Simple and real. Lena caught Mark's eye across the table, and for the first time in a long time, there was no guilt. Only gratitude. Betrayal had broken them, but truth had rebuilt them in a way honesty alone never could. Because in the end, family isn't about never falling apart. It's about finding your way back, even when you thought you couldn't.